order a regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Goshen Central School District for today, Monday, April 4th, 2022. Today's meeting is being held in the District Administration Building and live streamed through YouTube. Next on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of meditation. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda is next session, which we're going to skip over for right now. We'll wait for one party to arrive. So we'll go to the privilege of the floor. Megan Appel. Good to see you.
Hi. I'm Megan Appel. I've been a long member of the community for probably close to 20 years, maybe even longer, but I won't admit that. I came down here this evening to make you all aware of some COVID issues that need to be resolved within, particularly, I'll address the high school, but it really is more across the board. But before I do that, and I wasn't planning on this, I would actually just like to thank Mr. Coates for taking care of an issue where the girls' JV softball field did not have a fence put up, and all the other fields did. I spoke to him last week. Thank you. It was put up today. It is an absolute pleasure having you back in this district. So thank you very much. With that said, back to the COVID issue. Unfortunately, my family recently had to deal with COVID in our household. Don't worry, we are all safe. I don't have a mask on because it's completely healthy. However, with that said, I've discovered that throughout this whole process, there are things that are lacking amongst the school district website that need to be addressed. When you click onto the website and you get to the top where the yellow tab is, nowhere do you have your most recent guidelines. This morning I was panicking, searching, looking to see if my child had to wear a mask in school. She was pulled out of a class being told she still had to wear a mask when in fact she does not. She was told she had to wear it for the entire week. With that, we were originally told that she was going to have to go to the doctors and get clearance before returning to school, which was not true due to certain situations that are allowed. If someone is vaccinated, you're allowed so much time and then you can return. With that said, she did have to get clearance for physical activity, which to me includes gym class. She is on sports, multiple sports. I didn't have a problem getting clearance for that because, I mean, every parent wants to make sure the child is healthy. I pick her up from school and find out that they send her to gym class without having medical clearance, which brought about the question of, does that only refer to students who are in sports or all students who also have gym class? And I say that because there are so many children who have undiagnosed cardiac conditions that people don't know about for years. And unfortunately, due to COVID, people are finding out, or fortunately, they're finding these issues out sooner. And it brings about the question of, does the school district require medical clearance to return to gym class or only sports? That needs to be clarified. The guidelines really, because they've changed, and it's been a month since the mask mandate changed, that still, if you click on the link, I clicked on it tonight, if you click on it, it comes up telling you how many students have COVID, which is not currently updated because I actually know other students that have it, and it says 0 across the board. So we know that's not accurate. But on the bottom of it, it says masks. All masks must be worn by all individuals. It's been a month since that mask mandate's been lifted. That still is not updated. But your guidelines would be helpful. It would be helpful for the nurses in the school districts because the nurses, I understand, have had to deal with a lot. But I don't think that everyone fully understands what the actual guidelines are. I know things have changed a lot, but they've slowed down tremendously. You don't have guidelines changing every week anymore. So I'm here tonight to ask that you make sure that the district website gets updated, get those guidelines posted, the most current guidelines, because even when I was searching through my emails, I just could not find them. And really look into the whole thing about the physical activity, whether that the state is requiring only those who are involved in sports or all students. Because that's something that you really should consider looking into and making sure if the fact is that it's all students, that everyone does get clearance before they return. So, that is it. Thank you.
I can address part of that right now if you like it.
Sure.
So the question on clearance for physical activity.
Yes.
So the state follows the guidance of the American Association for Pediatrics. The American Association for Pediatrics is clear that it is for athletic competition only. From a personal perspective, I question that. But trying to clear every single student, what we would run into for them to be able to participate in physical education class from the sheer number of positives, people would have never been able to get clearance from their physician. Hence the reason that also they started to look at just clinical symptoms, if they exhibit clinical symptoms, to then go back and get the clearance. But as far as the guidance from the AAP goes, it is for participation in athletic programs.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Glad you're okay.
Thank you. Me too.
President's report, I have nothing tonight. Next on the agenda, legislative update. Okay. I propose we move down to 9, 10, 11. Okay. By the way, need a motion for the consent agenda. Tom Allison. Be resolved upon recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education approves the consent agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There is no old business. We go to new business. 11.1, a motion to approve the minutes. Mike? And Bill. Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education approves the minutes for the March 21st, 2022 regular board meeting and the March 28th, 2022 special board meeting. All in favor? Opposed? 11.2, we have a resolution for agreement for special education services. Greenberg, North Castle. Any motion? Chairman? Chad? Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education enters an agreement with Greenberg North Castle Union Free School District to provide special education services for students for the school year July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent to execute the agreement. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 11.3, we have a new superintendent hearing officer. Any motion? Tom? Allison? Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education appoints Melissa Ann D. Dyson, attorney at law, as superintendent hearing officer for education law section 3214 hearings for the Goshen Central School District as follows. Scheduled hearings that proceed to a waiver agreement only, flat fee $400 plus mileage and toll. Scheduled hearings that proceed to a full hearing, $175 an hour plus mileage and toll. All in favor? Opposed? 11.4, budgetary transfers. From the beginning of the year till now. Any motion? Tom? Allison? Be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education approves the following budgetary transfers. I'm going to put as noted here, so we don't do all those. All in favor? Sure.
Can you get some clarification, preferably on the long-term leave replacement?
Yeah, when someone goes on long-term leave, they put them in the regular salary code rather than the sub code. So I had to put money into that to cover their salary.
Any other questions?
Yeah, there were, mine's listing technology purchased through BOCES.
I can try to get over. What it is, just clarification. In the technology budget, we have, I'll say, three predominant plans: hardware, software, and BOCES. Frequently, if we get a better deal from BOCES, we transfer, let's say, software from the software line to the BOCES line, or from the hardware line to the BOCES line. But we budgeted in all three places to give us more flexibility.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious what we're purchasing and is it relevant? Is it needed? Or is it, just nice to have?
On my question, can we get an idea of where that was?
Sure. We can get they're all at the high school. What happens typically, if a teacher comes in, so the district has used a threshold, if you are less than one semester, you're considered a long-term sub. Anything longer than a semester, and that gets paid out of the regular sub code. If you go longer than a semester, so if someone goes out on medical, maternity, or something like that, and then they decide to extend, we then move them over to a leave replacement, and that's been a long-standing practice. When that happens, we then take that money out of the sub code and put it in the regular salary code, but we can definitely tackle this. We put what employees are covered for this transfer.
Any further questions? Okay. Got what I was.
All those in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We want to move to next on the agenda, superintendent report.
Budget presentation, if that's okay?
Yeah.
That's okay. So you go
Oh. I did. That's right. No, neither you guys.
Okay, so this will be our concluding budget presentation before our next meeting on the 19th, when we ask the board to adopt the proposed fiscal budget for 22-23. This will be a lot of summary information, however, there'll be detailed information in this presentation in relation to proposed personnel changes for this year. So Mr. Carter, Mr. Lind, and myself will walk you step by step in the last pieces and be prepared to address any questions that the board has. Ms. Cerner, if you go to the next slide, please. So just to review some of our enrollment projections, we are seeing static, if not modest, increases in relation to where our enrollment looks to be heading for next year. I had an opportunity about a month ago to meet with our new town supervisor, who did share that some of the housing starts that had stalled out that were potentially on the books years ago are now looking to get started. The town actually is looking about approximately 2 to 250 new housing starts. Again, I think this will lead to stabilization, if not increases in terms of what our enrollment will look like. The demographer's projections that we often use also with the BOCES COSER that we employ is consistent with these models also. Those increases that we will see, I'm not seeing any data that points to 20, 30, 40% or anything like that, rather stability and perhaps a class size at a time. I think we're well positioned and well prepared to deal with those increases and will not have huge budget impact either up or down, rather it will keep the district stable in terms of needs moving forward. Go to the next slide, please. So as per our previous conversations, if we rewind back to the early 2000s when we talk about the foundation aid formula, the foundation aid formula statewide had been dipped into heavily when there were significant cuts that had to happen on behalf of the state budget. Just as a reminder, the foundation aid formula is used for the state, projecting the state share of what is allocated to public schools around the district. On average, in some cases, some districts were receiving as low as 30 to 40% of what they were allocated for in the foundation aid. The new governor, Governor Hochul, has made a commitment with the legislature to fully restore that formula. So starting last year, some school districts started to see increases to restore their foundation aid levels to what the current law states districts are supposed to get. That's important to think about, because at any time, while the state, the governor and the legislature has made the commitment to fully fund this formula, but at any time also the legislature could go forward and change the law at the same time. So as the law is currently written, we received in concert with what you're saying on this slide, we received a significant increase in our foundation aid and are scheduled to receive the same in 23-24. It will be in 24-25 that we start to see these foundation aid increases level off, and will shift us back to looking more critically, not that we don't already, but it will shift us back to looking more critically at our local funding and hypercritical at our expenses where we stand at that time as well. Go to the next slide, please. And again, this just backs up what is in the executive budget proposal for this year in terms of what is happening this year and what is proposed for next year. One thing to keep in mind as well, as we sit here today, the governor has made her executive budget proposal. If you watch the news, we know the legislature has not yet resolved and come up with an agreed upon budget. I feel confident in saying to you, I do not believe that we will see any decrease in terms of what has been in the executive budget proposal, and we really need to move forward with the numbers that we have to be able to present a budget to the public. I think we are somewhat safe in going forward with what the governor has proposed. I've had an opportunity to meet with Senator Skoufis and Senator Martucci. They backed up that sentiment as well. They do not believe that there will be any reductions. In fact, if anything, they thought maybe in some of the use-based aids, transportation, BOCES, computer software and technology, perhaps there might be some additional funding there, but they felt confident in telling school leaders to move forward with what was in the executive budget proposal. Again, a large portion of this is predicated upon the significant amount of federal funding that the state did receive to be able to move in this direction. And again, we'll have to stay very mindful of where this heads moving forward in the out years of 24, 25 especially. Okay, go to the next slide, please. Obviously, the heaviest portion of any budget is in relation to staffing. We are very fortunate that we are seeing some of the increases that we are in foundation aid to be able to mitigate some of the issues that we are seeing as our students return back to full schooling again. And ask Mr. Carter at this time to run through some of the proposals that are included in this budget for staffing changes for next year.
Good evening, everyone. So you have in front of you our proposed increases to the faculty and staff in Goshen Central Schools. First being the music teacher at Goshen Intermediate School. The history of this position simply is that it was once a 0.6, increased to a 0.8, and now we feel the need to move that to a 1.0. This should allow us to have our instrumentalists focus on some more sectionals during the school day, because right now, all three of our teachers, including the current 0.8, they share the responsibilities of general music. So jumping out of the instrumental pieces and into the vocalist, if you will, or the general music sections does take away from what can be some expanded sections. So we believe it's time to increase that. We have been spoken to numerous times by representatives of the music department. I believe that we've also had representatives of the music department come here to speak to us, justifying the need. And I believe at this time we agree with that need. Next, we have the administrative support, increase of 0.75 to a 1.0. This is in the business office here in central office. At this point in time, I think it's fair to say that Mr. Linden has had a great opportunity to see the inner workings of the business office, and with an increase in special education services and a need to file reimbursement claims that are known as STAC, the increase of 0.25 should allow us to maybe do that a little bit quicker. Remember, this is something that happens for our students in the 10-month period, but also throughout the summer months, therefore being stacked throughout 12 months. So we feel it may be necessary to increase that in the business office. Next, you have a technical support assistant in the technical services department, and this would be a new title for us here in district. The reason for this increase from 0.6 to 1.0, traditionally we've had some high turnover in this position in the technical services department, and with a larger network system, if you will, larger network to manage, in addition to all of the hardware pieces, we want to have someone who is in this position for the long haul. We want to make this an attractive position, and we want to be able to provide the necessary assistance to manage everything properly. There's a larger portion of purchasing that would go into this as well, so there is a little bit of assistance with purchase orders and through WinCap or Envision, whatever it may be in the future. So we feel the need to increase that from 0.6 to 1.0. Next, we have school psychologists, increasing what we currently have, which is a 0.6, floating, if you will, to a 1.0. We're really hoping that this can provide assistance with a lot of the testing at Goshen High School with our out-of-district placements, district of location. There is a large need for that. And additionally, we're hoping that this individual can come in and help to chair some meetings, especially in those out-of-district locations, district of location, and also with our preschool presidents. Next up, you have school counselor at Scottsdale Avenue School, which I'm sure you are aware at this point we do not have a full-time counselor at Scottsdale, so we do feel a need to add a 1.0 counselor to Scottsdale Schools. Of course, this is a part of an ongoing greater discussion as we open up our guidance plan. We're very well aware of the needs of our elementary students, especially those in the K-2 building. We've heard loud and clear from our teacher representatives in that building. We feel that it's time to provide that full-time counselor to assist with, not just the mandated services, but also some of those discretionary services that we'd like to be able to provide. So that, in addition with some of our social work, may allow us to do that and provide for the needs of our students in the building. Next, you have a student supervisor, and we did put CJ Hooker and Goshen High School. This would be an addition of a new 5.75 position. Currently, we've taken one of our student supervisors from the high school, and we placed him at CJ Hooker during some of those peak times, if you will, in between lunches, sometimes in the afternoon, just trying to better manage the movement within the building. And I think we found some pretty decent success with that. So now we're hoping to get another 5.75 position in there to assist with much the same, and of course then give back to our high school because they have needs as well. So we're hoping that this will help us to better manage some of those behaviors during peak times due to transitions, and that's justifying the need for the student supervisor. Next, we have what we would term a floating custodian in the buildings and grounds department. So this would be an addition of a 1.0 full-time equivalent position. Essentially, we know that we've had additional square footage added through, of course, the projects and so on. So there's a larger need to manage the facilities within buildings and grounds. And additionally, going through COVID and COVID management, we've also learned that there are a multitude of things that we can also use some help with. This position would allow us to have what we would consider to be a more flexible schedule, not to exceed 8 hours. Mr. Freeze more than likely will work with Dr. Post to establish whatever that schedule may be of a flexible nature. to achieve exactly what we're trying to achieve. Finally, we have the assistant principal at Goshen High School. As you are all aware, with the director of health, physical education, and athletics coming on board, we do want that to be a dedicated position, right? So the addition of this assistant principal position will allow just for that, but also it will allow for better management of just your general building operations. It will allow for shared management of those teacher evaluations, discipline, whatever may pop up. So you have in front of you, in addition to the administrative team of a 1.0 assistant principal at Goshen High School.
Would that be a 10-month or 12-month?
So the proposal on the table at the time will be to include a 10-month position. There's not necessarily a need for that person to serve to go to someone else.
Thank you.
Okay, you go to the next slide, Ms. Serna. So, wanted to review both with the board and with our attendees, both in person and virtually tonight, the parameters for adoption of the budget. One of the most popular questions every year is to review the tax cap proposal. So I'm going to turn to Mr. Linden then. Mr. Turner, if you don't mind going bullet by bullet, I think we have this loaded. If you want to put just tap till the whole slide comes up.
So, a real quick review of the tax cap that's coming up. A lot of people refer to it as a 2% cap. There's like 10 different factors in there, one of them which is 2%, there's 9 others, so it's never really 2%. If the board proposes a tax levy above that, it requires a supermajority to pass the budget at 60%. If it's at or below the tax levy limit or the cap, then you just need a simple majority. In this case, the cap for Goshen would be an increase of just under $700,000, $690,000 and change. In the actual budget, including all the staff changes you just saw, the proposed tax increase is 0%. So we are about $700,000 below the cap.
Mr. Turner, you go to the bottom of that slide, sorry. Just hit enter until the bottom numbers come up.
Stuck.
One more time. There we go.
There we go. Any questions on the tax cap?
And just for clarity, if you look at the numbers, the local levy, the local share, and that's not looking obviously at our state revenue, will reflect a flat levy for next year as was directed by the board in the beginning of the budget development process.
Next slide. Okay, the budget itself, by state regulations, has to be presented in 3 parts: administrative, program, and capitals. I have 1 slide for each. And I'm just going to highlight certain key things in certain line items. Certainly if the board has questions on anything, we can go through that. If you go to the 19XX lines, other central expenses, that's increase in the BOCES admin costs. That goes up a fair amount every year, and to be honest, it's really beyond BOCES control, because by state regs, they have to put in the health insurance of all the current people and all the retirees in the admin budget. They can't break it up like we can. So that's just the nature of how that works. The next line down, 2010, is to restore summer curriculum work and additional staff development. And then the last line, employee benefits, is the administrative share of that, and primarily that increases health insurance and the teacher retirement system rates. Next slide. Program, that's the large part of your budget. That's part that runs all the classrooms and that. So let me highlight a couple things. In 2110, regular education, we were able to add 2 new lines to the budget. And these are, the first one is furniture replacement. It's really classroom furniture, desks and chairs. This will allow to gradually replace a few every year, so you don't end up having a huge amount in 1 year. It will be a gradual replacement, and the idea is to leave that in budget every year and do it phased in. It's $50,000 over 10 years. You should be able to replace most of the district's furniture so it doesn't become decrepit. The other line we added was a line for district textbook for a new series. Each of the buildings has their own textbook budget. But if you're buying a whole new series, whether it's math, science, social, whatever, no building could possibly afford that out of their individual budget. This is a district-wide line that Mr. Carter and Mr. Coates control. and decide with the principals each year if they're gonna use it for a certain series. And if for some reason they don't, it can be carried over to a future year. Maybe there's a series they wanna purchase that's more than 50. But again, that's a new line. In the next line down, 2250, special education. Half of that increase, 900,000, is because of the additional students who were in BOCES. That we're already up about 700,000 this year, and we anticipate another 200 next year, so I increased the budget by 900. That is a significant increase. Go down to 2630, computer assisted instruction. That's primarily increases in both hardware and software. If we go down to transportation, increase in fuel. As you may have noticed, if you've bought gas for your car in the last month, there have been increases in prices. Talked to Karen, and we increased the budget by 50 cents a gallon for both diesel and gasoline. So we're budgeting $3.75 a gallon for gas and $4.25 for diesel. Now remember, that's not the same price you pay because we don't pay taxes and things. But it's a significant increase. Is that the right number? My crystal ball can't really tell you exactly what it will be next year, but we feel that's a safe number for right now for the budget. And then employee benefits again. Again, it's primarily health insurance and TRS. You'll see employee benefits is required to be divided into all three categories: administrative, program, and capital. So this is the part for basically the teachers. Next slide. Capital budget. This is facilities, operations, and maintenance, capital expenses, debt service, and transfer, which I'll mention in a minute. The main change in maintenance is to purchase a loader. This will be a long-term savings, because right now we rent one for about $15,000 plus a year. In 10 years, we'll buy one and we won't have to rent it. So it doesn't save money instantly, but long-term it saves money for the district. New line here, 5510.21, is for buses. We're proposing to buy the buses for cash out of the budget. That saves the district two ways. One, we save all the interest costs for the 5 years that we normally borrow the money. And number two, district's going to receive, because of the state formula, receive state aid for that interest that we're not paying. That's kind of nice. The debt service, the decrease is because the bus bans we paid off, and so won't have them in the budget. And in the newest line, interfund transfer to the capital fund. Let me explain the difference between capital fund and capital reserve. Capital reserve, which there is going to be a proposition for that, is a fund that must be created by the voters, allows the board to put funds into it up to whatever the limit is over 10 years, but the voters then must approve to use it. Okay, so it requires two voter approvals, one to create it and then one later to use it. By transferring money directly into the capital fund, when the budget passes, the voters have approved that capital project, which is basically it's renovations and additions to buildings. It allows the board then to do capital projects without having to go back to the voters and not having to go back to voters for approval for more taxes because it's already built into this budget, which has a 0% tax increase. And if that remains in the budget every year, which would be the idea, you would be able to do things like roof repairs and things like that, that might cost a couple million, that you would never be able to do out of the O&M regular budget. So that's the highlights of the budget. Oh, but there was one more slide, sorry. Next slide. That's the summary of the budget on the top. There is the other half, the revenue budget. And again, most of this is primarily funded because the increase in state aid, that's both the foundation aid and increase in committing and categorical aids.
I just had a question about the computer assisted instruction. Does that include the STEM equipment as well?
Where
would that be under?
Refer to Jim. Is he?
I'm sorry.
When you buy the equipment for STEM, do you pay that out 2630 or 1680?
I have never been involved in the purchase of
Oh,
STEM
so it may come
equipment.
out of the building budget.
Yeah.
Some of it was rolled
Okay,
in.
I'll check on that.
Okay.
It probably comes out of the building budget. Every district does it differently.
Yep. No, I understand. Just wanted be sure that's part of it, that's all.
Yeah, it was the lion's share of that current equipment was purchased through the capital project.
They got fuel, the state contract, right?
Some districts use state, and some use the BOCES.
We use the state contract.
We use the state contract.
Okay, that state contract, monthly contract? Did they reprice it?
It's an annual contract, but what it usually is not a fixed price, it's so much over whatever the price is at, I guess at the port, it's called, yeah.
Okay.
When you deliver, so it's like a fixed number they add on to it, so it still fluctuates.
So,
Next slide. So as a reminder, there'll be two propositions on this budget. The first being, besides the budget proposition itself, the creation of a new capital reserve fund. As the next proposal that we are going to talk about will be funded in part by the prior capital reserve that the district had created. We should look to start that process again. Anything that we can do to mitigate any additional borrowing that we put on the back of the taxpayers is a step in a good direction. Again, just as a reminder, while we'll be asking to create the savings account, if you will, it doesn't automatically mean we're going to fund $10 million in it. It gives us 10 years of which to fund up to that amount. Many times we won't reach that amount because we just have to look at efficiency savings. So I'll use it for example for the comment that just came up. If fuel costs drop next year and we're able to grab some savings there, that's an opportunity for us to transfer into a capital reserve fund. Again, that's evaluated at the end of every year, but because we are going to deplete potentially the current $5 million capital reserve on the proposed project that's going to be on the budget, again, we want to ask the voters in the community to allow us to create this new reserve fund. Next slide, please. The third proposition on the budget will be for the small capital improvement project that we have been discussing. As we've shared, both under what they call the ESSER and the CRISA, both federal monies that have been entitled to districts throughout the state will have approximately just over $4 million that we can appropriate to a project. There's specific parameters of which that money can be used. What we are looking at is to begin some air quality improvement upgrades specifically in Scottsdale, this project will focus on. This will allow us to replace air handlers, the P-deck units that sit on the side of the wall, and this will, again, as we've discussed, include cooling within the building as well. The other $5 million, again, that I was just discussing, will come from the Capital Reserve Fund. This will allow us to replace the roofing on that building. As we've shared previously, most of our roofs are anywhere from 20 to 30 years old. There have been leaks in this roof, and we need to look holistically throughout the district over time. How do we begin to address these? Again, the board has seen a presentation on the potential product, if approved, that we would be able to use moving forward. Again, this project would total just roughly over $9 million. The request is to use just over $9 million. However, if the operating budget is approved in conjunction with this, as Mr. Linden had shared, we do have that $1 million in transfer to capital that could potentially allow us to complete more roofing as part of this whole body of work at the same time. But again, this will be a separate proposition for the voters to approve during this year's vote. Next slide, please, Michelle. And then as a reminder, we have 2 Board of Education seats that are expiring on June 30th. Again, there'll be the opportunity for community members to submit petitions to be able to be qualified to run in this election. As a reminder, those petitions will be due by April 18th at or before 5 p.m. to our district clerk, Mrs. Maureen Farrell. Any questions can be fielded with her at the number there as well. Any final budget questions, concerns, needs for clarification before we finish this portion of the presentation?
I just have a comment. In 8 years of sitting here, these are the best budget presentations I've ever seen. You guys did a really nice job. Thank you for the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, one, keep going, and we'll go, we've got to do the end.
Great. As a reminder also, as part of the budget planning process, once the board adopts the budget on the 19th, as per the budget development calendar that the board previously adopted, we would hold our budget hearing on May 3rd. Mr. Linden's office would then finalize all the appropriate documentation. We would hold that just prior to our meeting and hear any final questions or comments on the budget. And the BOCES annual budget vote, again, that's on the operational component of the BOCES budget, would be on the 21st at 6 p.m. for the board to participate in. Anything else before I transfer off of budget? Okay, I'm going to just switch over to strategic planning to give the board an update. Sorry if I can steal the computer just for a second. Okay, so yeah, you'll hear as I go. So part of the work that we began with our district stakeholder committees on the strategic planning process looked at multiple different steps for us to work with parents that sat on the strategic planning team, administrators, teachers, paras. We really had a very good 2-day session, and this is some of the draft work that we began that later in the year as we start to get towards action steps, we'll be calling the committee back, potentially some of the committee members with our consultant Judith Wilson to come before the board to present this information out of draft format, looking for board endorsement of the work that we did. One of the first things that we taken a look at was our mission statement that's posted on the district website, really in concert with the work that we're doing in the district. We broke into teams around the room to look at this. And when we looked at how our staff engage, how our community engages with our students, we made some modifications. And I'm not going to go through and read, and I'll make sure that the board gets a copy of this as well. We came up with a new draft format that we felt was more reflective of the work and the environment that we're trying to create for our school district. Goals. So in the goal setting process, what we did, we know that surveys went out community-wide asking for solicitation for feedback on what does the district really need to focus on. These goals are purposefully and intentionally, if you will, at the 10,000-foot overview level. Two big pieces that came out, I'm going to work backwards because the second one is a little bit easier. We kept hearing a consistent message in the anecdotal statements that were made on my student needs a cohesive experience when they come through. That when they move from 2nd to 3rd grade, they shouldn't be entering a whole new school district. When they move from 5th to 6th grade, the same. And then when they move to the high school, what can the district do better to support a cohesive experience in their time here in Goshen? The reality is, if we look at many of our graduates, when a student starts kindergarten here, they're very likely to graduate high school from the school district. So that was an important message that we had heard. Similar also to some of the other things that we have been looking at, we want to make sure that our core curriculum content is mapped that way as well. That when a student starts a math program in Scottsdale, that they're going to be using similar language in their math program, in their literacy program, in their science program, in their reading program. Again, that message was very clear. The second goal that we worked at was really looking at deeper student engagement and career development. It's very easy for us as teachers and leaders to say, you should do this because. One of the nice things about having students on our committee was to have that student voice to give feedback to, we understand how we learn. Not And they were clear, we get it, the adults make the choices in the end, but we simply ask that you listen to some of the feedback that we give. If we take the pandemic as a learning experience, if we listen closely to the students about what was best for them over time and what their needs were, if we can find ways to incorporate that into how we plan, how we give them choice, and the options that we put before them, we believe that we can really set up a healthy learning environment that really prompts students to want to stay here and take part in the programs, take the extra classes, and feel good over time as they study here in Goshen. Again, what happens after this now, it's up to us to use these goals to create action plans and action steps beyond setting these goals. That's where we get more specific. When we talk about our Choose Love program, what is that going to look like? Who are we going to engage? What are the teachers going to do? That's when it gets more granular. That's the next step in this process. So these are the two high-level goals, again, we'll be working with and tweaking with to get to a final point, like I said, when we come back before the board again to ask for endorsement of the work that the Strategic Planning Committee has begun. Scroll again. In doing that, our committee's tried to look at what are some of the values that we place on the process. And again, I'll give you a minute to read through those yourself. I won't read them to you. But again, this was not something people at the table came up with. These were the comments that that came through the feedback in the surveys. That was a really hard part of the process because people had to pull those surveys apart. We did a whole layout on the wall of tagging and trying to look at the consistent messaging that we were hearing. But again, setting up what do we value in the learning process was very important. And finally, if you can scroll up again, sorry. All the way down to. So this was very curious to me, and I actually enjoyed talking mostly to our students about this. When we talk about being a Goshen Central School District, we forget that these are students. And not only that they are students, we should be learning alongside of them. And as we talked about going through a process with the students, some of the students couldn't believe that they were actually sitting next to their teachers going through this process. So they came up with this concept, if you will, not just of a portrait of a Goshen Central student, but of a Goshen Central learner. Because if we value and we place emphasis on supporting our teachers to go to professional development, our administrators to go to professional development, if we're engaging them to take part in a new strategy, why wouldn't they be a learner too? And why shouldn't that be reflective ultimately of the product that we put in the classroom at the same time? So together with our students on both of these committees, again, they came up with what they call the portrait of a Goshen Central learner. The goal is, as we tweak this and as we work through it, to put it into a cohesive plan, and ultimately, once the board endorses this, this becomes the center of our work. When we talk about a budget planning process, when we talk about development of professional development, when we talk about the purpose of what we do in school, this comes back to what we do each and every time. This needs to be the focus of our work and should guide us into the future as well. The action plans, again, will give us the roadmap on how do we intend to do that, and it will allow us over time to evaluate what are we accomplishing or what are we not accomplishing at the same time. We're off to a very good start. We're excited about coming back to the board again to be able to present this work, but I just wanted to give the board an update on where this work stood as we've gone about a week now since we last met with the committee. Any follow-up, clarifications, things I can explain further?
Yeah, how many students did you have?
We had 3 students come over the 2 days, and they were all 3 were 11th grade students. And what was nice was they spread out amongst the committees too. I think they were a little nervous at first, so they wanted to stick together, but it was nice to see them spread out into different committees and work with different adults too. And I think the adults were really impressed with what they brought in terms of their conversation and their comments at the same time.
What was the number of students that participated in the survey? I think you told us before.
I don't want to misquote the number, but from 5th grade all the way up, it was easily 50% per class. But there were a little bit more at the younger grades because they were a captive audience in one spot versus trying to catch them in the secondary. The high school really worked hard trying to catch them at a specific class. Our participation was good, but it was definitely stronger in the younger grade levels. But we only started with 5th grade and up.
Thank you.
Other questions? continue to make sure we come back on a regular basis and keep the board well informed on this and engage with the board once we have a simplified plan and report to be able to move forward with. All right, this week then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Instruction, Personnel, and Technology, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Pucci. Once again, good evening, everyone. Just a couple of quick updates for you. I certainly wanted to make mention of the Goshen High School Performing Arts, and all the participants, the cast and crew. We had a wonderful Addams Family musical presentation at the high school. It was great to see our auditorium in full use, sound, lights, stage crew. Everything was wonderful. I'm sure if you had a chance to go to that, you would agree. That was Friday, March 25th through March 27th. Just wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Lloyd, Mrs. Scully, Mr. Quinlan, and Mr. McKay. In addition to the cast and the crew and those representing the music department, especially the orchestra, for all of our hard work. Honestly, I thought everything was wonderful. I look forward to many more in that auditorium. As I had reported last time, I believe you're aware that we had two teams in Odyssey of the Mind that competed at the state level. We had the C.J. Hooker team and the Goshen Intermediate School team. Both did place second place. We're very pleased that we will be sending them to Iowa State to compete in the Worlds. So for the first time, we will have two second place teams competing, one of which would be the defending world champion. So we're excited at the potential there. We wish them the best of luck. You know, our parent volunteers that are coaching, Mr. and Mrs. Seligman, Mrs. Losi, and others that are volunteering, we're very appreciative of their hard work and efforts in preparing our students, and most certainly appreciative of the continued hard work and efforts of our students. I think this is going to be a good one for us, and I wish them the best of luck. I hope we bring home another championship. Also want to say thank you to Mrs. Laskowski, who's working tirelessly on all of the accommodations. No small task. So once again, thank you to Mrs. Laskowski. Pleased to report today that we did receive the memorandum of understanding from the Orange County Department of Mental Health for the satellite clinics that we wish to bring in. It was reviewed by our legal team. Legal is quite pleased with that. So at this point in time, we are prepared to get it to our Board of Education for our next meeting for your approvals that we can move forward. Again, we do plan to have the satellite at Goshen High School. Our goal is for a September 1 start running through June 30th of 23. And then of course we'll reassess. Ultimately, we would love to have a satellite at each of our campuses, or rather at each of our buildings. So long-term goal there. We've spoken of this in the past, but just to refresh your memory, just in case, the goal here is to address the behavioral and mental health needs of our students. As you know, we've noted that there is a slight increase. By no means is this to supplant or replace the work of our school counselors, our psychologists, our social workers who work diligently daily. It's also not to undermine anything that our classroom teachers are doing by way of the SEL programs, but rather to provide more support for our students. So this will be with agreements made between student compliant privileges, if you will, parental consents and so on. Orange County will handle all of the building, all of the staffing. We simply have to provide the space. Any equipment that might be necessary, Orange County will also supply. When it comes to the hiring process, they will adhere to all of our district hiring procedures, our policies, but they will not appoint anyone without our consent. So we're really excited to move forward. It's been a long time in the making here. Our PPS department, Ms. Hendershot and Ms. Marino, had a large part in bringing this here as well. And once again, we look forward to finally getting this satellite out in Goshen High School. The Goshen School District Wellness Committee, we're in the process of convening the Wellness Committee now. I did send out some emails to, let's say, approximately 20 plus potential participants. So we're just waiting for some acknowledgements and some commitments to be made. Our purpose is to review and to potentially revise some of the local practices here, wellness practices in the district. So, we will have a focus on student wellness, such as social emotional well-being, personal safety and wellness, physical activities, nutrition. So this is something that is in existence that may be in need of some revisions, and that's exactly what we're looking to do. As soon as we receive the commitments that we need to move forward, we'll we'll send out the dates, and have our meetings in this room. And finally, something very, very exciting, something to be very proud of as a district. The New York State Technology and Engineering Educators Association had their 59th annual conference on March 27th. We're very pleased to announce that the Goshen High School was named the recipient of the Program of Excellence Award, recognizing the STEAM Lab and Mr. Fedor and Mr. Johnson. We were very honored to even be thought of, for this award. It's a big deal for us. You have Joe Fedor, you have Dylan Johnson, you have Danielle Nguanti, and many others that had a large part in this. The association was very pleased with what we offered for our students. They were very pleased with the program, very pleased with the facility, hence Program of Excellence Award. So again, very, very pleased. I want to thank everyone for their hard work, all of their efforts throughout the year, bringing in our CTE, computer science programs, our business portion, our internship, that financial literacy piece. Everyone had a large part in this, and we've been recognized. And I will end on that note. Thank you very much.
Questions, comments? Good. Okay. Next on the agenda, privilege of the floor. Board member issues, committee reports. We need to do two separate. Just read them both up there.
Yes.
Any motion to go into executive session? Tom and Allison? I'm going to combine the two here. Be resolved, Board of Education will enter into executive session with the intent not to reconvene the business portion of the meeting for the review of a student discipline matter. And for discussions related to the employment history of a particular person or persons. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Any good night?